In this video, I'm going to show you how to build a very modern and professional Slack AI chat agent. Now, if you've built Slack apps before, you might have a good idea of how they work and some of the limitations and surfaces that you have to develop on. But a few months ago, Slack released an update to their apps that allows you to mark your app as an agent or assistant, and that gives it some very cool new features and surfaces that your users can use. This was a very quiet update. I had to scroll through the developer change logs to even learn when it was released. I'm not sure why it didn't get any hype or attention, because it really does bring some amazing functionality to your app that we're all now used to when working and talking to a chatbot after years of using things like ChatGPT and Claude. We're only going to use n8n. There's going to be no code required to do this. In fact, the finished example that we're building is very, very simple. It looks just like this, but I'm going to walk you through it from the ground up. And the end product is going to look something like this. And I'll point out the differences between an agent in Slack and a traditional Slack app. The first thing that you might notice is you can suggest prompts to your users to give them a better idea of what your tool and what your app can do. So I've just added some placeholder prompts here, but I'll just say hi there. And when I send this message, you'll notice something else that's different, and that is a loading skeleton and if you saw, it was very quick, but it said Slack agent is thinking down below. So it looks like you're actually talking to a user and mimics the skeleton UI that you would get if you were talking to a real person. So that's pretty cool. It also automatically keeps track of your chat history with each user. So users can go back and jump into prior conversations or wipe the slate clean and start a new chat. And last but certainly not least, you can allow your users to pin your app to the top bar of their Slack workspace. Slack apps are notorious for kind of getting lost when you have lots of apps installed in this kind of complicated sidebar. So with Slack agents, users can pin them to the top bar and just start a new chat at any point from any place within Slack. So big upgrades. It's very easy to build. It'll take us about 20 minutes or so. And once we're done, we'll have a fully functional app. Now, what's out of scope for this video is how to build a great agent. There are so many tutorials on YouTube that will show you how to build a rich and fully functional AI chat agent. We're just going to have a very basic one up and running and focus more on how to leverage the Slack agent features that I just showed you, so that when you build this UI for your company or for your clients, it will be far more professional and modern than anything else that have been built for them before. Before we jump into it, just a little bit about me. My name is James Francis. I run PaperJam, which is an AI automation agency for growing businesses. I've built hundreds of these workflows for clients. If you want to get in touch with me or have any questions about any of this, my contact information is in the description of this video. So without further ado, let's jump into it. What we're going to do is we're going to start by creating the app on Slack's developer dashboard before we jump into n8n. So we'll head over to api.slack.com. I'll go api.slack.com. And you'll see a link to your apps in the top right. We're going to click that and we're going to create a new app. And from scratch, we'll call it Dunder Mifflin AI. So we'll build an office themed app and select the workspace that you want to develop in. And the first thing we're going to do is tell Slack we are building an agent. So there's this new tab in the sidebar, Agents and AI Apps, and we want to enable this toggle. I actually don't think this will work unless you provide a short description, so I will do that here. Something like, think of me as Robot Dwight. And as I mentioned, you can show suggested prompts to users to give them a better idea of what your app is capable of. You can make it dynamic, so you can change the prompts depending on, for example, the user who opened up a new thread, or you can just show the same hard-coded prompts to all users who open up a thread with your app. And so we'll just do that right now, and we'll add one that's, I don't know, pranks. What are some pranks I can play on Dwight? And we'll save it. Okay, so now we're ready to start building, and the first thing we're going to need to take care of is authentication. So we're going to head over to OAuth and permissions, and what we're after here is this OAuth token, which we can use to set up credentials within n8n. In order to get that token, we'll need to install the app into our Slack workspace, but before we do that, we have to make sure that we're requesting all of the appropriate scopes or permissions that our app will need in order to take the actions that we need for the app to function. So we're going to scroll down to scopes, and under bot token scopes, Slack already added this assistant write scope when we opted into the agent behavior, but we're going to need a few more. And off the top of my head, I think it's going to be chat, write, channels, read, and IM history. I think that's all we need, but the good news is if I forgot one, it's going to be very clear when we try to take an action we don't have a scope for. We'll get a clear error message, and we can come back here and add anything that I forgot. So now that those scopes are added, we can go ahead and install to PaperJam my workspace and grant permission, and now we have our OAuth token. Copy that token. Let's head on over to n8n, and we will create a new workflow. Now, of course, this workflow, as you might imagine, will start with a Slack trigger, and we're going to listen for new messages posted to channels. Now, this might be a little bit confusing, but Slack considers all threads as channels, even if they're direct messages with your app or with another user. So you can have a channel with 100 people in it or just one-on-one. They're all channels. That's why we're listening for this trigger. And we will create a new credential here. And this is where you want to paste that OAuth token that we got from Slack and save. Trigger on new message posted to channel. We don't need to watch the whole workspace. We just want to watch the direct message channel with each of our users. So we're going to need the channel ID of our app. And in order to get that, we can head on over to our Slack workspace. We should have a notification that our app was installed. Go to our app, and you can grab your channel ID by clicking the channel name. I mean, they really don't make this easy to find. And at the bottom, in tiny font, you have channel ID. And we can copy that, head back over to n8n, and paste that in channels to watch. Now we want to set up a webhook so that Slack knows where to notify us when something happens within this channel. So it says set up a webhook in your Slack app to enable this node. The webhook URLs are up top here, test URL and production URL. And if you have experience developing with n8n, you know that you typically use the test URL. But when you're developing a Slack agent, it's actually easier and much faster to use the production URL because you need something that's always listening for example, new messages coming from a conversation with a user. And in n8n, test URLs can listen for a second, and then they stop as soon as they receive something, and it takes a really long time. So they actually recommend that you kind of test in production with the production URL. And that's not ideal, but it makes it a whole lot easier to develop. It makes editing the app after you've already deployed it a little bit tricky. Because that means that you're making live changes often, or you have to disable your app entirely and then make some changes and then re-enable it. But what I often do is just copy the workflow to a new workflow. I duplicate it, I make the changes, and then I can copy and paste the changes over to the original workflow, which has kind of minimal downtime if you're making significant changes to your app after you've already deployed it. So we're going to use our production URL. I will copy this And also, very importantly, make sure to activate the workflow, because that's what makes this webhook always be on and listening. Then go over to our Slack app page and go over to event subscriptions. And this is where we tell Slack what URL to send notifications to. We'll paste it in the request URL field, and n8n will handle the verification for us. So we should get that confirmation. And the last thing we need to do here is tell Slack which events to send to that webhook URL. And the only one we really care about is a message IM. A message was posted in a direct message channel. We'll save those changes, and now we should be able to go over to Slack and test that, well, we're at least being notified when a user sends us a message. So we'll say, hi there, and we're not going to get a response because we haven't set up the agent part of this. But if we go over to n8n and we look at our executions and we wait, it doesn't seem like there are any executions. Although, oh, here we go. Okay, I'm not sure what happens there, but here is a successful execution. We can open up to see the data, and you'll see this text from me, which is, hi there. So now we can start building off of this payload that came through. I'll copy this over to the editor so we can pin and work with that data. And the first thing that we'll do is add an AI agent. So again, it's sort of outside the scope of this video to really get into how to build an agent. So we're just going to build the simplest possible proof of concept here. The prompt that we're going to give to this agent is just the text that we receive from the Slack trigger. So I'm going to drag that in, and I'll give it a custom system message. You're a helpful assistant for Dunder Mifflin Paper Company from the Office TV show, US version, of course. And that's good enough for now. I'll add a chat model. I typically use OpenRouter so I can test models more quickly. 4.0 mini is fine. And we'll also give it some memory so it can have some context of the conversations that it has with our users. So I typically use a Postgres chat memory. I have a database set up in n8n, but you can use Supabase or whatever Postgres instance you'd like. And the only reason I wanted to set this up is so that we can set the correct session key. So if you've worked with n8n's built-in chat feature, it has a session ID, which kind of identifies the thread and the context of a user's conversation with the agent. That's not the case when you're building with Slack. We are going to want to define what that key is. And in this case, it's the thread that the user started. So this thread timestamp is effectively the thread ID. This is going to be consistent for all messages within a particular chat. So that is what we want to identify as the key. In my database, I think the table name is just chat histories, and the context window length is fine at 5. So now we've built the agent, and we just want to respond with the agent's response and post that back into Slack. So as you might imagine, we will add a Slack action, message action, and send a message, resource message, send message to. Let's execute the previous nodes, which will run that agent, hopefully get some response. Yep. So the channel that we want to send the message to is the same channel that the incoming webhook data came from. So we'll go to that node and pull over the channel. We'll leave this message type as the simple text message for now, and the text will of course be the output from our agent. I'm going to add an option to not include a link to the n8n workflow, which is the default behavior. And I will also want to make sure that we are replying to a message. This makes sure that the reply goes to the same thread, the same chat conversation as opposed to creating a new chat conversation with that same user. So I am going to reply to a message, and it says message timestamp to reply to, and I'll bring in the timestamp, TS, from the trigger. Okay, so I'm going to save this, and we'll head on over to Slack, start a new chat, and see what happens. Hello there. Cross our fingers, and we do get a message back. But then we get another one, and another one. And it seems like we're in an infinite chat loop, and our agent is talking to itself. So something's going wrong here. I'm going to go over to our n8n workflow and deactivate it to make sure I don't run into any rate limits or spam my own Slack workspace. But something's going wrong here, and maybe we can figure out what's going on in our executions tab. And you can see we have lots of executions, which is strange because we only sent one message to our app. And let's see if we can learn about what's going on here if we look at this. So let's see what the trigger we got was. And you can see this text, this message was sent. Looks like we're really having some fun with this. Was sent by the bot, not by me. And so what this means is we're getting notified every single time that a message is being sent in this channel, even if it wasn't sent by the user, even if it was sent by us. And there's no way to tell Slack to, well, we only care about the messages that a user sent, not a bot or anything else. So we have to handle that filtering on the n8n side and make sure that when these types of webhook payloads come in, we ignore them. And we can do that with a simple filter. So let's copy this data to our editor, unpin, and add a step in between the trigger and the rest of the workflow. And we'll make this a filter. And we only want the webhook to continue through the workflow if the bot ID, which is a string, does not exist. And I typically add another condition here just to make sure that we are ignoring any. Sometimes you get some payloads that are things like the thread was opened, even though you didn't subscribe to them. It's a little strange. I'm not sure if it's a bug on the Slack side, but I found that the performance is more reliable if you just verify that this text field exists and is not empty. So I typically say that the text field, which is a string, does exist. And if we execute this, hopefully it will be discarded because there is a bot ID, but if there weren't, it would go through. And that should stop this noise where our agent seems to be talking to itself. So we'll save that and to go back to Slack and say, are you still there? And hopefully we only get one response this time. And wait. And it looks like we're not getting anything. So it looks like we made a mistake. Oh, I didn't activate the workflow. It's hard to remember to always activate it in this case since I don't normally do that so early in my process, but I've activated the workflow and I'll just say, are you still there again? And we got a response, and it looks like only one response. Okay, so now we have a basic functioning chat agent, but we're not really utilizing all of the features that Slack has given us now that we've opted into that agent app type. We do have access to the chat history automatically by default, so that's nice. But what I want to do is add that realistic user typing status loading UI. And in order to do that, oh, looks like, I'm glad I took so long to explain that because it looks like we just got another text. Oh, you know what? I think that was the first message that I sent, probably failed and was retried. And that was responding to this message. So I'm just going to make sure that's what's going on in our executions. This was filtered out, which was the bot's message. This one made it all the way through. which was our message. Okay, so I think that was just a one-off issue because of the failed webhook was automatically retried by Slack. It failed because the workflow was deactivated, and then when they retried, it was activated, so it responded to that their message. So where was I? So now we want to add that loading UI, that nice loading UI when you do type a message to our agent. And in order to do that, let's jump over to, this is a document in the Slack API documentation, developing AI apps. And if we scroll all the way down to the AI app flow, it walks you through the steps here, listen for the message IM event, which we're doing, and then respond to the message IM event. Your app should then call the assistant thread set status method to display the new status indicator in the container. We recommend doing so immediately for the user's benefit, which makes sense, right? As soon as you get a message, the first thing you want to do is tell the user that you've received their message and you're thinking about a response, which takes a few seconds because you're using an agent. So in order to set status, we need to make a post request to this endpoint with our authentication token in the HTTP authorization header, the channel ID, the status, and the thread timestamp. Now, unfortunately, n8n doesn't have a built-in node or Slack action for this, maybe because it's so new, but that's okay. We can just use an HTTP node to do this manually. It takes a little extra configuration, but it's really not so bad. So let's go back to our workflow, and after the filter, but before we get to our agent, we're going to, let's copy some data that made it all the way through our workflow to the editor and pin it, pinned here. And we're gonna add an HTTP request. And I'm gonna put it above the AI agent so that it's the first thing that happens after a user message makes it through this filter before we go on and do any agent processing. So we will make a post request to the endpoint from the documentation, and for authentication, we're going to need a generic credential type, bearer auth. We'll create a new credential, and we need that OAuth token from our app configuration page again. So we'll go back to, where was it, OAuth and permissions, copy the OAuth token once more and paste it in here and save. You need to do this twice because this is technically a different type of token. It is a bearer auth token versus a Slack specific token. We'll save that, and we do want to send a body, and if my memory serves me right, you want to add a channel ID with a value of the channel that we received the message on. We need to include the thread timestamp, which also comes in the webhook, and then we add in the actual status text that we want to display to the user. So I'll just do is thinking ... We will save this, make sure the workflow is activated, and hop into Slack and see if this works. So once I send this message, you should within a second or so start to see that UI. And there it is. Dunder Mifflin AI is thinking, and then we get this nice handling of that skeleton UI. What's also nice is that Slack will automatically get rid of that status once you do respond with a message, so you don't need to handle canceling that status or removing it automatically. At least in this basic example, Slack will do that for you once it's done. The last thing I'm going to show you is how to format the responses from your agent in a better way than what the default behavior is. In order to demonstrate that, let's start a new chat with our app, and I'm going to try this suggested prompt because hopefully the agent will respond in a list, and you'll see what we can improve. So what you'll notice, it looks okay here, but you have these weird asterisks. And if you are familiar with Markdown, which is a very common text formatting protocol or pattern, the LLM intended for these prank titles to be bold. But Slack, unfortunately, has their own version of Markdown that is slightly different than the internet standard for Markdown. So you'll get these mismatches where the LLM intended the text to be formatted in one way, but Slack doesn't support that. Or I should say, didn't support that until very recently when they introduced a new block response text that is the standard Markdown that was purely introduced in order to handle direct text returned by LLMs. So in order to add that better formatting, let's go back to our workflow, back to the node where we send a response. And instead of sending just a simple text message back, which again isn't formatted quite right, we are going to send blocks, which is Slack, the name of the components of Slack's UI. And this expects a JSON payload, and you can look in the Slack developer documentation for what they're expecting here, but I will save you a little bit of time. They're just looking for an object with a key of blocks, which is an array of different UI blocks, but for our agent, we only need one block, which is another object with a type of Markdown and a text key, which, as you might guess, is the output from our agent. And we're actually going to need to stringify this output, otherwise we'll get an error. And the notification text is just the backup in case the blocks can't be displayed properly. So we'll save our progress here, go back to Slack, start a new chat. Let's do this same suggested prompt. Hopefully we'll still get a similar formatted list, and you'll see the difference. Thinking, and there we go, right? So now we're not getting those weird asterisks, we're just getting the format that was intended by the LLM. There are some limitations, right? So Slack doesn't support tables, even with this new Markdown block, so you might have to give your agent some instruction not to ever respond with tables, otherwise it'll look sort of strange, but you can play around with that on your own time. The last thing I'll show you is you can also pin these apps, as I showed you at the beginning of this video, to a user's top bar here, so they can just start a new chat with you wherever they want in the Slack workspace, which is super powerful. So that's it. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, I'd really appreciate it if you liked the video and subscribe. This is the first video ever on my channel, so it'd be very helpful feedback on what types of things resonate with you or don't. I'd love to hear from you either way. But I hope you learned something and have fun building. Thanks for watching.